of a real world, which exists in... Welcome to Open Reality, my friends. My name is Chad. You have created this theory called my big theory of everything, which basically explains everything that happens in our world. And I've predicated most of my channel around it. And I've interviewed Tom a couple of times before. So those people who are new from Jason's channel watching this, Tom was definitely a big influence, and he is also a proponent of simulation theory, but that's probably where the differences between Jason and Tom end, which I'll get to in this video. Now, for many of you, of my viewers, it was the first time that you've come across Jason and his ideas, so I was exposing you guys. Now, I'm just going to break down Jason's archaic theory into some bite-sized understandings for those who didn't quite get it from his talk, and let's be frank, it is quite complex. And by no means am I an expert on it. I still have many unanswered questions, and I need to continue going through his material, which I have. And thank you, Jason, for emailing me Awaken the Immortal Within, his book on PDF, which I'm going to read as well. Now, some of you posted some really interesting questions during parts 1 and 2, and just keep dropping those questions below because I'm going to ask Jason about them next week when I reconvene with him. Now, from what I understand, Jason believes that our world is a holographic construct called a simulacrum. And this is a word he didn't make up, but I believe took from the ancient texts. The simulacrum, or simulation, is a copy or duplicate of a real world, which exists in the presumed real reality, according to Jason. It's made up of actual hardware in combination with, I guess, spirit. And the hardware is way more advanced than anything we could ever imagine. Now, here in this simulacrum, we're unfortunately quarantined away from the real world, never being able to, I guess, be exposed to it. But it is possible to cross-contaminate with other simulacrums, of which there could be thousands. We're also experiencing a time dilation here. So in this simulacrum, time moves much slower than in the real world. For example, 50 years here may only be 17 minutes in the real world on a VR headset. And as I said before, Jason believes that there could be thousands of simulacrums, perhaps more than 10,000, and according to Jason, each one has its own governors. Now, let's just stop here now and compare this information to Tom Campbell's MBT, my big theory of everything. I'd say that, yes, the two believe in simulations, the two believe that there could be many simulations, but that's really where the argument ends, or the similarities. Now, while Jason says there could be as many as 10,000 or more simulacrums, Tom Campbell really doesn't speculate as to how many, he just says there are others. And Tom also believes that once we die here, our consciousness is tuned out of this reality and returns to another reality, which he calls like the spirit world or the afterlife. And I don't think Jason really believes in a spirit world, though I'm not entirely sure about that. I did ask him what is home, and he said he couldn't really tell me. I think he believes that once we die here, our consciousness is just simply recycled back into another body, very similar to a soul trap. Here's where it gets interesting, because Jason said that this simulacrum has been hijacked or corrupted by a particular virus that he calls Artificial Intelligence X. And if that wasn't the case, then when we die here, we would just exit the simulacrum and return to the real world, apparently where our, I guess, human bodies or some type of bodies are. Now, I'm not entirely sure about everything in Jason's theory, but it seems that this Artificial Intelligence X, or AIX, infiltrated humanity or the world somewhere about 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. And the exact date I'm not sure, but it occurred for sure before the Great Pyramids were built. Now, according to Jason's website, AIX is a control system that alters timelines, it initiates purges of knowledge, and it can also reset civilizations when they venture too far out of line. What too far out of line means, I don't know. Now, clearly we can see that Archaics and MBT have very vast differences. Jason believes our world was infiltrated by an evil AI system having to do with artificial intelligence, and Tom Campbell, on the other hand, doesn't believe any of that. Jason believes that this AIX is responsible for all the manipulation and deceit that we've seen in the world over the last 5,000 to 6,000 years. It can manufacture events, and it can manipulate the calendar and time. And the scriptures of almost every ancient culture reveal this hidden hand in their writings. On the contrary, Tom believes that the world only appears evil because the collective nature of our consciousness is in a lowly evolved state. He calls it a kindergarten. Earth is a kindergarten. We are therefore not the victims of an outside force like AIX, according to Tom, but rather the victims of our own fear. Now, Another difference is that Tom does not believe that some type of real world exists outside of the simulation. Tom doesn't even speculate as to what could be out there because he just says we don't know, we're living in a closed system, and he calls it other. And it's really true. You know, if you are in a closed system, you could never really know what's outside of it. It's like a video game character trying to see what's in the real world. It's just beyond its level of understanding, comprehension, and abilities to see. And for that reason, Tom doesn't even speculate as to what's outside the simulation, but Jason does. He believes the real world is out there. Now, another difference that I've seen between the two is how both men arrived at their theory. Tom, while a former NASA scientist and an intellectual, derived his theories primarily through his out-of-body experiences. He studied with Bob Monroe, and so almost all of his information comes from his own truth in going out of body. And in them, he journeyed throughout the LCS, the Larger Consciousness System, exploring other simulated worlds, including spending considerable time in the spirit world. I hope the focus is okay here, because this is a big sticking point with this camera. If the focus is good here, it may just be a keeper. Jason, on the other hand, has arrived at his theories and his predictions by piecing together ancient research. His archaic theory is chronologically based, which he states proves that events are not random, but strictly coordinated by the AIX. Now, while Tom leaves the door open to speculate what is outside our simulation, as I said earlier, Jason believes that there is a real reality there, and that we are multidimensional beings, that our consciousness is somewhat connected to that real world. And I suppose our collective goal here is to break free of the constraints of this simulacrum and return back to the real world without having to come back here. Jason has said that this world is a copy of the real world, so perhaps the real world is like this world except without the AIX keeping us in check. Actually, Jason said that that's how this simulacrum was before AIX entered it. You know, we were building civilizations, we were doing our own thing, and then all of a sudden it was corrupted. And as I say all this, really, dozens of questions fill my mind, such as, if there is a real world like in Jason's theory, can we die there? Do we have bodies like this there? And why did we enter the simulacrum in the first place? Tom doesn't believe in a real world, like I said. He believes our consciousness is eternal, that we are part of this thing called the LCS, or Larger Consciousness System, that we're just individuated units, souls, living inside simulations created by the LCS. And you're probably wondering, why would it do that? Why would it create souls and then create simulations for them to inhabit? The purpose, according to Tom, was to help itself, help the LCS, evolve and avoid disintegrating into nothing, which is basically entropy, the second law of thermodynamics. And Tom believes that this is inherent in all systems, including the LCS. Now, the LCS, as I said, created individual souls and placed them all in simulated realities purely to help them evolve, because when they evolve, it evolves as well. And Earth is one such simulated reality. And these simulations, like Jason's simulacrum, appear to be completely real. This desk is real, I'm real, right?
I'm real. I'm real.
Actually, if you look into science and you look down to the level of the way beyond the atom, we can see that it's just empty space. It's just energy, and it's our senses that give us the impression that things are real. And that's how good these simulations are. Now, I could talk forever about the subtle differences between both theories, and there are many more questions about each one, but I eventually have to get through this video. If I did address all those things, this video would be hours long, and I don't think you'd be happy with me, although Jason does make his videos 2-3 hours at times, as I've seen. And I'll also add that Jason believes that the Great Pyramid of Giza is an artifact machine designed to collapse artificial intelligence X. I guess it hasn't done it yet, but it was given to us by what Jason calls a benefactor. I have no idea who that benefactor or what that benefactor is, but I'm sure these are questions that Jason has answered in his many videos and books, but like I said, I'm new to his theories. Now, as a result of AIX, this thing called the Phoenix phenomenon makes changes in our world every 138 years. And I think it relates to the pyramids, but of this I'm not entirely sure. But it keeps the calendar, and it keeps the archons in check. This was according to Jason's website. Now, I need to ask Jason, who are the archons? I think I have an idea, but I want to know who he thinks they are. And according to Jason's theory, the year 1902 was the last time that the Phoenix reset. The next reset will occur in the year 2040. And these Phoenix resets undo all the damage that AIX causes in the loss of historical integrity and mankind's ability to keep the calendar. Jason's theory definitely has a lot more nuances to it, a lot more detail. For sure, if you've never heard of Jason and his archaic theory, it may seem way out there. But I think what makes Jason's theory so intriguing is all the research that he's done. I mean, he's basing his theories on historical documents and the 1,000+ books that he's read, some dating back hundreds of years. And Jason is also a very captivating figure, having spent 26 years in prison. And for the bulk of his sentence, he absolutely threw himself into his study as a way to pass the time, but also because he was interested in all these ancient scriptures and this type of history. Now, I believe that a free person would normally not have the schedule or inclination to devote so much time and energy to a pursuit like studying all of this that Jason did. So he's literally and metaphorically paid his dues when it comes to knowing the things he knows, which is why he's such an astute thinker and speaker. Now, while both men, Jason and Tom, believe we're living in a simulated reality, I think my overall takeaway is that Jason's view is a bit more pessimistic, maybe even a lot more pessimistic. The goal of humanity, according to Jason, well, at least that I see, is to get out from under AIX and escape this particular simulacrum. I always have trouble with that word. Now, Tom, on the other hand, is more optimistic, believing that we are supposed to be here. And he calls this Earth a virtual reality trainer for consciousness and believes that on a collective level, humanity is evolving over time, albeit slowly. And if you look at the last 100 years, you can see that we are living a better life today than we did 100 years ago, better than 500 years ago, and yet even better than 1,000 years ago. So things are progressing. I agree with that. Of course, it's very easy to compare Jason's archaics to something like a Soul Trap or the Wes Penra papers, but I think it goes deeper than that. Definitely, there is a big difference between Jason's archaics and Tom Campbell's MBT. Well, I hope I've outlined fairly clearly here the differences between these two theories, and I hope this video filled in some of the blanks for some of you new to Jason's theory. I still have a plethora of questions I need to ask him, along with yours, of course, which will happen next week. Please subscribe so you can be alerted to future videos. As well, I have a free email list. It is below. And if you are getting value out of my content, and if you can, please help support the channel via Patreon or PayPal. I also have the thanks button enabled, and anything you give is greatly appreciated and goes towards the channel, so thank you for that. I'll also leave you with this. Whether you resonate